know who we are as Texans. I think we can do better than Ted Cruz.
What does being a moderate Democrat mean in the state of Texas?
I'm somebody who tries to get things done. And in order to do that, we have to have some bipartisan consensus. We might come from different backgrounds, but there are things that we share, and that we spend all of our time focused on the things that we disagree on. We won't get anything done on the things that we do agree on.
I brought up the buoys. You have an opinion on that?
I think it's barbaric. I don't think it's consistent with who we are as Texans or as Americans. I don't think that's border security. I think that's being inhumane. There is a difference. We can secure our border without treating people this way.
He played football at Baylor and then in the NFL, and he is no stranger to political upsets. Colin Allred won his House seat by beating an incumbent Republican. Now, he has his sights set on Ted Cruz. Representative Colin Allred in this edition of Spriester Sessions. Congressman Colin Allred, thank you for joining us. Talk about why you made this decision to run for U.S. Senate.
Yeah, well, I feel strongly that we can't afford 6 more years of Ted Cruz. He's somebody who has pitted us against each other as Texans and as Americans, and who I think hasn't been doing the job. And I'm somebody who was a 4th-generation Texan. I was raised by a single mother in Dallas. I went to school in Waco. My family's from Brownsville. I think I know who we are as Texans. I think we can do better than Ted Cruz.
Do you think he's vulnerable? And if so, what issues do you think he's vulnerable on?
Yeah. Well, I think Texans are ready to move on from him. And I think they're ready to move on from his divisiveness. I think they're ready to move on from somebody who is podcasting 3 times a week and doing everything he can to get on cable news, but not actually doing the job of trying to pass legislation that helps Texans. And that's one of the biggest things. But it's also going to be a huge contrast in terms of personalities and approach. I'm one of the most bipartisan members of the Texas delegation, and really in Congress, I try and find that common ground that maybe comes from my football background, where I try and work with folks to find the things that we can agree on. I'm somebody who will bring together our state and our country and do it in a way that I hope moves us forward.
Do you take anything from the O'Rourke campaign that came so close to beating Ted Cruz but didn't quite get over the finish line? Are there lessons to be learned there?
Yeah. Well, we're going to build on what happened in 2018. And I think the fact that that was a close race shows that so many Texans were ready to move on. But this is a different election, 6 years down the road. We're in a different place as a state and as a country. And this is about our future as Texans. We're an incredibly diverse and dynamic state that's growing so rapidly. We have so many things in our favor, but we also have a problem that we have some of the most divisive political leaders in the country, led by Ted Cruz. And for us to really fulfill our potential, we have to get leaders in place who actually understand who we are and can build on that. And that's what I'll try and do.
Talk about name recognition. Is that a battle that you have to fight right now?
Yeah, of course. You know, I've been busy representing my congressional district in parts of Dallas and suburbs that are north and northeast of Dallas. And I'm not somebody who tries to, throw bombs online so that I can get my name, in the paper or be on cable news every night. I've been a serious legislator who's been trying to help our veterans, lower the cost of healthcare, invest in our infrastructure, create jobs here in our state. And so, yes, I'm looking forward to, as we're doing now, going around the state, introducing myself to folks, telling them what my vision for our state can be, and hopefully folks will agree.
What do you hope people take away from this interview about Colin Allred?
Well, I'm a normal person. I was raised by a single mother who was a public school teacher. I went to public schools in Dallas. I struggled some growing up, but it was a big deal for me to get a scholarship to play football at Baylor, and I was lucky to have a chance to play in the NFL. And I came back and have done voting rights and worked in the Obama administration and served our state in Congress. I care about our state, even the folks who disagree with me. I'm somebody who has kind of the unique distinction of being endorsed by both the major business organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in my elections, but also the major labor organizations like the AFL-CIO. It is possible to bring us together, to talk about the common bonds that we share. That's what I'll be doing in this campaign.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I know you've talked a lot about divisiveness and to put away the divisiveness. You've billed yourself as a moderate Democrat. I think you started billing yourself that when you then defeated Congressman Sessions. I mean, what does being a moderate Democrat mean in the state of Texas?
Well, whether I'm moderate or not, I'll leave it to the voters. I'm somebody who tries to get things done. And in order to do that, we have to have some bipartisan consensus. We're a state that has a lot of big business in it. We need to work with our business engine, really, to help our economy and to understand that that's going to also help our workers. I've tried to find that common ground Because as I said, I think it's just part of my background as somebody who was, captain of the Baylor football team, understanding that we might come from different backgrounds, but there are things that we share, and that we spend all of our time focused on the things that we disagree on. We won't get anything done on the things that we do agree on.
Talk about the border. Obviously, I mean, it's forever an important issue in South Texas and San Antonio. It's become a national issue. What are the solutions to the border crisis that we see right now? Are buoys part of the solution?
Yeah. Well, my family's from the Valley. My mom and my aunt grew up in Brownsville. My grandfather was a customs agent in Brownsville. And I don't just see the border as a political backdrop. I see it as a place where real folks live who are raising their families and want to have serious legislators who actually help them deal with some of the downsides of our inability to have any kind of comprehensive immigration reform, but not demonize their communities. And that's what I see too much from Senator Cruz. Going down to the border, using it as kind of a safari to point out problems, but not actually producing any legislation to help deal with it. We actually do have some frameworks in a bipartisan way that I have some legislation in the Congress that I've signed on to that will both help us secure our border, but also allow us to do it consistent with our values, deal with the folks who are here who are undocumented, and better shape our immigration system to meet the needs of our economy. And that's what I hear from employers all the time.
Give me some specifics. Are you talking about visas? Are you talking about an easier pathway to legal immigration?
Yeah. Well, it's multiple things. I think it's also taking some of the burden off of our Border Patrol agents that's administrative and that really has nothing to do with what their job is, to shortening the time frame for getting an asylum claim actually being heard so that we don't have folks that are just released and don't know what they're going to do for years on end. But then also shaping our immigration system to actually meet the needs of our economy. So in the fields that we need folks in, which is almost in every field at this point, that we're better able to take talented people from around the world and to make them into Americans. And yes, helping undocumented people find a pathway forward.
Yeah, I brought up the buoys. You have an opinion on that?
I think it's barbaric. I don't think it's consistent with who we are as Texans or as Americans. I don't think that's border security. I think that's being inhumane. There is a difference. We can secure our border without treating people this way. And we're better than this as Texans and as Americans. That's what I firmly believe.
Let's talk about San Antonio. I noticed your background, that you actually worked for the Department of Housing and Urban Development when former Mayor Julian Castro was the secretary of that department. Did you learn anything from him? Did you work together?
Yeah.
Are you still in contact with him?
Secretary Castro is a good friend. I endorsed him when he ran for president. I'm also good friends with his twin, Joaquin, who's a colleague of mine. And I think San Antonio has so much to offer. One of the things I've been really focused on in my time in Congress, the last 4 years I was a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. And we have so many folks who have served, who are serving here in this area. And I'm somebody who has made this a real focus to make sure that we keep our commitment to our veterans who have served us so well. We're the state with the most women veterans of any state in the country, with the second most veterans, period, and we'll have the most period pretty soon. And so we have to have those resources to take care of our veterans, to make our veterans' healthcare system work better for them, make sure they get access to their benefits. These are all things that have been a focus of mine in the Congress and the House, and certainly will be when I'm in the Senate.
You've been highly critical of Ted Cruz through this interview and then before. But to get there, you have to win the Democratic primary. And I actually interviewed the man you're running up against in the Democratic primary, Roland Gutierrez, sitting in the very same seat that you're sitting in. He said that he'd talked to you and that you guys had talked about the fact that you guys are going to be running against each other. How would you term your expectations for the primary?
Yeah. Well, I'm focused on beating Ted Cruz, and that's what I will remain focused on. And I think part of winning the primary is by making my pitch that I'm the right person to actually beat Ted Cruz. I got into the Congress by beating a 22-year incumbent Republican in a hugely expensive and difficult race that most prognosticators just a month out gave me a 10% chance to win. Ended up winning that by 7 points, had a tough re-election. And so I've been through these fights and I know how to win in tough races. But it's also true that when I win, I'll be a senator who will actually get things done and will do it in a way that brings us together as a state and as a country. That's also part of my record. And I think there's a hunger for that in our state. I think folks are tired of having politicians who just point out the things that we disagree on and don't try to actually mend some of these ties that have bound us together for so long as Americans. We can do it. We can do it as Texans.
Do you have a gentleman's agreement with Roland Gutierrez to not attack each other, tear each other down before you even face Ted Cruz?
Well, I think so. It's just not my style, and I think people will see that. I'm certainly try to stick to the substance, But also, I think that the best way to win the primary, as I said, is to show that I'm the best person to beat Ted Cruz. And that has to be my focus. And I think we've shown in the opening months of our campaign that we're already building from the resources to the kind of grassroots movement that it's going to take to do this, with my history of running in tough races and the fact that, as I said, people can expect, based on how I've served, that I'll serve in a way that I think is going to be helpful for us as a state.
For better or worse, a good indicator of how the race is going so far is how much money has been raised. And you've had an impressive fundraising effort so far. What do you think that means, and how essential is that to you getting your ultimate goal of beating Ted Cruz? Well,
we had about 100,000 donors in the first 2 months of our campaign. And I think that says that there's so many folks out there who want to be a part of this. And I want to give them a positive vehicle to channel into, that we together as Texans can move on from what I think has been one of the most divisive senators in the country. And so that's what our fundraising to me really reflects. But it also reflects that I know how to run these tough campaigns, that we're able to put together the campaign necessary to raise those funds. It doesn't just happen accidentally. You have to work hard for it. But I've worked hard all my life, and I'll keep doing it in this race.
Uvalde's been such a tragic event for not only that area, but really all of South Texas and Texas itself.
That's right.
How do you ensure that never happens again? Or what things can you do as a congressman and maybe a senator to make that happen?
Well, my wife and I have 2 young boys that we're raising in Dallas. I think like every parent, we hugged our kids a little tighter. And I know I watched them walk into school that week with a pit in my stomach, just worried that the unimaginable could happen at our school. You know, we make folks slow down when they drive through a school zone. We make you put your kids in a certain seat in your car because it'll keep them safe. I reject the idea that there's nothing we can do to protect our children in their schools. And I also reject the idea that anywhere we gather, whether it's a mall or a place of worship, has to be potentially the site of the next mass shooting. There are common sense steps, there really are, that we all agree on, that are consistent with the Second Amendment, maybe not all, but the majority of folks agree with, that are consistent with the Second Amendment, that we can take that will help save lives. I'm proud that for the first time in 30 years, we did do something, passed the Safer Communities Act that John Cornyn helped lead in the Senate, and I helped push through in the House. It's helped to reduce gun violence. The first time in 30 years we've done that. We have to build on that spirit because our kids deserve it, because our communities shouldn't have to deal with this, because this uniquely American problem is one that we can solve together.
You're going to be meeting with San Antonians after this interview. What's your message going to be to them? That somebody from the Dallas area can identify with what they're going through?
Yeah. Well, I want to hear from folks. That's part of what we're doing, is going around understanding we've got this great, dynamic, diverse, growing state, and there's, we could be a powerful country in our own right. The 30 million people we have here, the size of our economy, and every area has different challenges. I've tried my hardest to be a great congressman for North Texas. And now I want to try my hardest to be a great senator for the entire state. And that means hearing what are the unique challenges here in San Antonio or anywhere else across our state. But I will say this, there are some common threads that I hear all the time. Folks don't want much. It's very modest, I think, what they expect from their government. I think about the single mom like my mom, who is working 2 jobs, who's probably hoping that her member of Congress or her senator is working as hard to do things to move the ball forward as she is. And that's what I'll try and do in the Senate. That's the message I'll try and impart to San Antonians.
That's all the questions I have. Anything else you want to add? Anything else you'd like to bring up?
No, that's great. I just hope that if folks want to get involved with our campaign, go to colinallred.com. Help us out.
Congressman Colin Allred, appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Keep up to date with all of San Antonio's top news, weather, and so much more by clicking the like and subscribe buttons below. And once again, thanks for watching KSAT.